So I will start with my introduction speech, which is written because it's hard for me to remember it. Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you all and each for coming here for the expert panel on the topic difficult communication in healthcare. My name is Hrdlička and I lead a startup company called ComGuide, whose vision is to create a virtual space where healthcare professionals can try out difficult communication in a real environment. And we believe we can achieve such a goal through virtual reality and virtual humans. When we embraced the idea of making practical training of difficult communication in healthcare more affordable or accessible, we knew we needed to talk to people to find out if there really is a space to make communication training better in any way. In startup words, because we are a startup company, if there is a problem, we can help to solve through technology. But the more we have talked to the stakeholders, physicians, nurses, hospital suppliers, the more we realized we need to know more. And the more question we've had. So when an opportunity emerged, we decided to organize this panel to ask questions to multiple experts at once and see where the discussion lead us or lead them. And as it is best to share knowledge, we wanted to make such an event public so anyone could ask and hopefully get new information. And this leads me to our most honored guests. One of the brightest stars is Julie Hauer here, who is also assistant professor of pediatrics at Harvard Medical School. We are incredibly lucky to have you here, as she is in Prague to attend European Pediatric Neurology Society Congress. And thank you, Julie, very much for coming here. And I have to thank Dr. Katalin Štěrbová, who made this possible. And another expert is Martin Loučka there, who teaches difficult communication at the 3rd Medical Faculty of Charles University. He is the founder of the Center for Palliative Care and serves as a board member of the European Association for Palliative Care and also works as a psychologist at the Department of Palliative Care at Tomayer University Hospital in Prague. Thank you, Martin, for joining us. Professor Alexandra Kolenová, head of the Department of Pediatric Hematology and Oncology at the National Institute of Children's Diseases and Comenius University in Bratislava. We at ComGuide are again lucky to have her as a partner in this project. Thank you, Alexandra, for coming. And last but not least, Daniel Hodulík from Centrum Dohody, who is coach and mentor for many medical teams and experts. And we are again glad that he's here with us. So this expert panel is part of the project funded by the Visegrad Fund. Aim of the project is to explore possibilities of using virtual reality in communication training at the hospitals. So I have to thank pediatric department of faculty of University Hospital Motol here. Especially I would like to thank Professor Zdeněk Šumník, who's head of pediatric department here. and who helped us with the project, and that we're thankful that his department joined us. Another important partner is the Department of Neonatology at Szpital Karova and Medical University of Warsaw. Thank you, Agata and Alexandra, there for coming to Prague and for helping us with the project. And I already introduced the partner from Bratislava, Alexandra Kolenová, who's in Prague with Esther Bubláková here to help us. So that's our honored guests. But I'd be lost without our organizational team. So thank you for solving all the details I'd forgot. Thank you, our team. And finally, I have to thank my beloved wife, Lucy, who helped me to come up with the panel. Thank you, Lucy, for being here. And thank you for being my professional support and my personal difficult communication expert. Now, let me mention a few practicalities regarding this event. There will be, or maybe probably almost no time for questions after individual experts' presentations. So if you couldn't ask due to time reason, save your question for the panel discussion that will last for 1 hour, so hopefully there will be time for a question there. The whole event is streamed online, and the video will be available even after the event. If some of you have a problem with that, please let me know, because your face may appear there. That definitely counts for speakers. If you are uncomfortable, okay. After the roundtable discussion, you are invited to stay here for a meal, drinks, and hopefully chat with us, experts, and the others. Okay. At the end of my introduction speech, I would like to introduce or hand over the microphone to our moderator, Terezie Jiráskova, who's not just moderator. Terezie is a dramaturg of Radio Wave and lecturer of media training. She has won a journalism award for her work for Czech Radio for promoting palliative care or palliative medicine and hospice care in the Czech Republic. So thank you, Terezie, and the microphone is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. It's my pleasure to introduce our first panelist, who is Professor Alexandra Kolenová, and the topic of her presentation is named Difficult Communication Training in National Institute of Children's Diseases, Bratislava. So enjoy and let be informed the best way as possible. Thank you very much.
It's the end of the presentation. Okay. See it all. Okay, so good morning. Thank you very much for inviting me here. It's a great pleasure for me to meet new people. I really appreciate that we can be partner in this grant. I have met Jan a couple months ago, and I tried the virtual reality thing, and I was really excited, and I thought, okay, we will try to go to this. I would like to also introduce myself. I am definitely not expert in communication. I consider myself maybe expert in pediatric cancer and maybe in acute lymphoblastic leukemia. So I will try my best. But during my training, I have studied in Czech Republic in Brno, and then I was trained in St. Anna Kinderspital when I stayed for 1 year, and then I stayed 1 year in Denver with Professor Steve Hunger for the whole year as a research scholar. And I really admired the way how things were communicated inside of the team and also to the parents and families. So I came from the environment that I never had any training in communication. So I was learning on my way as I went. And one of the largest experience I had in training was when the people came to Slovakia for palliative care communication, and there were people from Spain, and the first time in my life I could see what does it mean to have a workshop about the communication. And one of my I don't know if I can say, but the largest experience was when I was in a big box with the real rat. Yeah, so this was the thing. Then I faced my fear, and so this was one part of maybe a little bit too extreme training. But when we work with the patients who might die, it's really extreme situation, and it's difficult to be trained. So this is just to introduce myself. So I would like to cover these topics. I would like to introduce a bit about our pediatric cancer care in Slovakia, and then what we did to overcome obstacles in a training, in communications, and also something from our journey in Bratislava. In Slovakia, we have 3 centers for pediatric cancer. They are very well distributed across the country. The largest hospital is our institute, National Institute of Children's Diseases, and it's a comprehensive pediatric center, and a pediatric hematology oncology is a part of this hospital, including bone marrow transplant, which is the only one in Slovakia for kids. We are also part of European Reference Network, PETCAN. So we were audited, and now we belong to this net. In our hospital, in our pediatric hematology oncology department, we try to really round the care around our patient, and we try to work as a multidisciplinary setting, and education, not only of the pediatric oncology, but also of soft skills, are part of our aims, what we do. So we have quite a large team, as I have seen abroad. So we will really try to also include psychology, social work, musicotherapists. We have teachers, so physiotherapists. So it's not just the doctors, nurses, but also our psychosocial team. And we do not have special palliative care team yet. We have this is a team in our pediatric hematology oncology. We have about 110 patients per year. We have a mobile hospice and patients could go, but we do not have. So this is a nice example here in Motol, as Lucia did. So I hope we can develop this in our hospital in a future. So we also have multidisciplinary meetings, and one of the things which we established when I came back from abroad to Slovakia were rounds, the doctors and nurses together, and psychologists is with us, and also social workers. So it used to be only the doctors and separately nurses, so now we try to work more together and also with another specialties. So in these multidisciplinary meetings, teams, definitely what we need it's a communication, and so we need the communication, as you are all professionals here. So we need to explain complex diagnosis to our patient, complex prognosis, therapy, roadmap, and also to explain if the things are not going as well as we would wish. We also need to learn how to express empathy in in right way. How can we support our patients, our parents of our patients, also siblings, and certainly what we have, we also have a lot of conflict situations, not only sometimes with the families, but also inside of the team. And this is what I really admired in United States, that people were somehow, they knew how to do this, but I was never taught this. So, and I still think I'm on a learning path. I can only share with you that my daughter, she's studying medicine now in Holland, and part of the education is a professional development, and the first topic what she learned was how to give feedback, how to accept feedback, how to not be offended, and how to correct my behavior according to feedback, and how to ask for help. So this is a basic first month what she learned in school, and I said, this is what I have never learned in my school. And so this is one of the more important things, and to give a feedback to colleague, it's sometimes really difficult. So if we are looking for the ways how to do it, that it's a non-aggressive way, that it's a really peaceful way, and but it's difficult, and I think it's very difficult in our culture. And culture in Slovakia is very closed. People like to they're scared to tell the opinion. They're scared fear to ask the questions. And I think it's more even Slovakia. Yesterday I've seen the presentation of you, and I've seen many questions. So I think in Slovakia we still struggle, and I think it's our past, and so it's the way of learning. And so I don't know if you have the same, but you will tell us. So what we did and what we are doing. So I am sure we have a lack of education, because I see it now on my children. What does it mean to educate? So I am trying to learn with my kids. And this lack of education in communication in schools, but it's in elementary school, high school, and also during the medical studies. I think there is no specific focus. And as I see, my daughter, she has it the whole medical school. It's not just one class. It's all the time. So what we did in our department, we have decided to do seminars which are multidisciplinary. We do it 4 times a year, usually in spring. So we do March, April, May, and June, and we try to put 20-25 people are in one this seminar. We started with 1 day, then we did 2 days, and now we do 3 days, because now they ask me, couldn't we do it twice a year? So, and it's always multidisciplinary. We have there everywhere. It's doctors, nurses, psychologists, teachers, people who are assisting. So everyone is invited. And we always do it that they get credits, especially our nurses and doctors, they need. So we do it with our societies for nurses and the doctors. The second thing, and we always try to bring the topics. We have done it for 5 years now. We collect the feedback, and then we evaluate what people are interested in. And usually there is always the palliative care, palliative communication. There is always what people are interested to learn more. Of course, our nurses, doctors, everybody is working a lot. They have really a lack of time. So we have decided to do it as a part of the working hours. So they have it as they are in a job. We have in our hospital possibility to have such not just for the conference, but also for such a training. So this was important. We don't do it on weekends. We do it Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And it's really hard for the team leaders to organize work, because in the hospital always somebody had to work. So we do it like this. And then we also, Slovakia is a small country, and as nobody has this education, so also we have a lack of educators, and I hope I don't offend anyone, but it's really hard to find someone who can talk about this 2 days and to do workshops. So we usually try to get international speakers. It's the best from the Czech Republic, because our team doesn't speak English, so not everybody speaks English, so we try to find people, and we have mostly people from Czech, or we travel abroad. So we went to several places, and we also tried to send our nurses, doctors for education. Of course, there is a lack of resources. So our hospitals are public, and there are no resources for this part of education, for these things. So we do it as a fundraising. And I have to say this was one of the fathers of our patient who helped us to establish our non-profit organization. He was a bestseller of cars in Slovakia, and he told me, we train our people how to sell car, and your nurses, they never have somebody who would take care of them, who would take them somewhere, and we do this for this car seller. So he was the one who was a leading change in this, and it really helped us. And he said, we will take them to a nice place, and it will be, we take care of them. And it really was the changing thing that he was the one who helped us to establish. So it's completely free of charge for everyone who goes there. And we also try to have we try to do it in nice place that they can also go to have some nice activities together. And as for a hierarchical structure, so in our hospital, when I start to work as a chief, it was always, did she already tell them? I think the patient that they are dying, So everybody was asking the chief to communicate this. And so we also started to do more these team building activities to understand that everybody can be a leader. And this is a very difficult part too. So we try to encourage people, and we do this team building that we are all equal, and that we are humans, and we can talk to the families certain ways, all of us. So this is also very important part in our culture. Yes, that also nurse, when she's alone with the patients, she can do some talks, and if she feels capable to do it, so she has more courage to do it. I don't know how much time I have, so okay. So we try to grow and try to find ways how to improve. So there are the pictures from one of this was a palliative care seminar. It was led by a chaplain, Vítězslav Wurst from Czech Republic. So he led one of these palliative care communications days. Our nurses and doctors really enjoyed it, and we found it very interesting. So then he showed us this movie, Jednotka intenzivního života. So he showed us the movie, and then we decided to organize this movie for a larger community. So it's a documentary here in Czech Republic about the end of life in palliative ward, but it was the adult ward. But it's very stimulating and can make a lot of discussions. So we invited our people, we invited the medical students, and also the physicians and nurses from National Institute of Oncology in Slovakia. And was very very nice discussion. And then this is how we get to know Dr. Ondrej Kopecký, and he went through vital talks, training. So we decided to work with him because, as I said, we try to find somebody who would be able to come. So he taught us in several seminars these vital talks principles, which we try to work with. So besides this, in our department, what we do every year, we have an event, then we do memory for the children who passed away. We invite the families, and it's very deep. Even we have done it for 6 years. Every year families tell me that please do it again. So each candle represents the child, and the family lights the candle and give it. We do it with the concert, and then afterwards we have nice reception where we talk. And what I have to say that our young colleagues, they really don't want to go there. They avoid it, and everybody is worried to go because they don't. How I will talk to the parents? So that's why I put it here, because also to get the younger people there, it's really difficult. So they need to learn, and that's why they need to train. we also do once a year celebration of life where we give medals to children, and last year I had 60 people from our staff there. So on a memory we had only 5 people, but here 60. So everybody wants to share good news, but it's difficult to talk to with this when it's the death they're mentioned. So I would like to conclude that these are the team of our nurses. These are the team of doctors, also with the multidisciplinary specialists. And this is our kind of multidisciplinary small team. And we are ready in Bratislava to try your virtual reality tool. So the team is ready. We will go to also to some place, and we can really train, because I think it's really important that we can do this together. So thank you very much for your attention. I hope it fulfills your expectations, because I am really not the expert in this, and I'm looking forward to listen to your presentations.
WS, excuse me.
I'm sorry if I can interrupt. We still have a few minutes for questions. If you can stay here. That's my fault. So if you have any question to Alexandra Kolenová, Professor Kolenová, then please ask. We'll still have like 3 minutes. Okay, Martin wants to ask.
Shall I just speak loud, or shall I?
For the stream, it would be better if you have microphone.
Okay. So thank you very much, Professor Kolenová, for your amazing presentation. I would like to ask you whether there is any education compulsory for oncologists or pediatricians in Slovakia during their preparation for specialization.
No, there is no compulsory. I am the one who is a garant for pediatric hematology oncology, so I am kind of making it compulsory, but it's not. It's not compulsory. I know that our palliative hospice Plamienok, they doing, but it's not obligatory. It's a part of the training. People can choose it in a medical school. But now we talk also with National Institute for Cancer that we really need to establish this, so we will. We don't have it compulsory.
Okay. Next presentation. 5 Ws of teaching communication skills in medicine. This is the topic of our next presentation. Dr. Martin Loučka is the author of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. So good morning, everyone. I'm really pleased to be here. Thank you very much, the organizers, especially Lucia and Jan, for organizing this event, and also for your passion and long-standing enthusiasm in this field. I'm sure that this is one of the steps on your journey, which will bring, amazing things for developing communication skills in medicine. So I'm really excited to be here today, and I'd like to share with you some of my experiences and thoughts, maybe for a discussion later, about why, who, when, where, and what should be actually the content of the teaching, and for who we are actually doing this. Just where do I come from? For this presentation, I will use 2 main sources of inspiration for me. One of them is my teaching at the Third Medical School here in Prague at Charles University, where we have compulsory communication skills classes for our medical students since 2015. This goes actually in the 5th year of the medical school, so almost at the end of the medical students' training at our school. It's 12 hours split during the week, and it's a role-play-based teaching where students actually learn by practicing and getting feedback from their peers and also from the teachers. I'm quite proud that we are also examining this, that at the end of the subject, which is a compulsory subject for all students, they might also face an exam question like a practical one. So how to perform delivering bad news, which is, I think, really important. It was success for us when we managed to negotiate this with our medical school, because since that moment on, all students are really keen to learn this because they know that they actually might get this, as part of the exam. So it really helped us to improve the motivation of the students to dig into it really seriously. The second source of inspiration for this talk is our program Espero that we run in our NGO Center for Palliative Care. The Espero program we built with Dr. Hrdličková and a few other colleagues, and it's an intensive 2.5 days training for medical professionals. This is actually also based on role-play-based scenarios on practicing the skills. We have special modules for physicians, for pediatricians, for nurses, and for paramedics as well. It's 12 hours that consists of 25% of theory, so there is very little theory. We only want to teach the very basic and very fundamental skills. We would love to have these trainings for weeks, but we decided, okay, we have to focus on few things and then we can have some advanced courses, but we really want to practice those skills. So there's only very little theory. Then the other quarter is actually some model scenarios and discussions when we show the students or the attendees of the course how to do it, and we discuss it together. And then 50% of the time is actually spent in small groups in practicing those skills and getting again feedback from peers and from the teachers. So since 2019 we have over 600 attendees, and I think we have learned as much as they learned from us, because this was a really interesting journey. So that's where I come from, and now the 5 whys I've already explained what the abbreviation mean, and I would like to start with the question why. I hope, or I dare to say, that for those of us who are here today, the why is not that important, because otherwise you wouldn't be here if you didn't think that communication is important in medicine. But still, just few thoughts. Jan, in his presentation, already mentioned that very famous, how many percentages of complaints in medicine are related to poor communication. This is a favorite article of me from one of the prime Czech newspapers, saying that physician is not a god anymore. I really like this opening sentence. This, I think, is kind of interesting to think about. What are the expectations of physicians? Okay, for those of you who are physicians, good news, you don't have to be God anymore. But obviously, for quite a long time, the general public and journalists, maybe including some journalists, might have thought that, yes, physicians are some kind of like gods. So they should know everything, they should be able to do everything. And there is no wonder then that it might be very difficult for physicians to just stop for a while, listen to the patient, listen to the families, and not providing miracles. That's something what we know and what we hear very often from clinicians in our trainings, that they face these, questions of miracles. We should be able to do something. There is such great advances in medicine, so we should be able to do something. So replace this with communication and supporting the patient and the family might seem to be kind of like counterintuitive. We also know that most clinicians who are currently in practice did not receive the evidence-based training for communication. So Professor Kolenová doesn't have to feel any bad, because you are not the only one. Actually, most people who are taking care of the patients nowadays didn't have any training in communication. I'm sure you have heard it as well in the past, that communication is something like you just know how to do it, you are born with that, or you are not born with that, and then you are lost. But we don't really have to spend much time on this, because this is some kind of soft skills that doesn't have to be developed. It's fascinating to hear about Dutch colleagues taking this so seriously, and I'm sure that we are also kind of like developing, but we have to also think about all those people who are already in practice without the proper training. Our attendees from the Espero program report that available education in their specialties. That was why I was asking about the compulsory trainings while they are doing their specialty trainings are insufficient. I think it's the same in the Czech Republic, that the available training, which will be like compulsory, because honestly, it's difficult to get physicians or other medical professionals to do some like optional training just like that. Even for them, it's sometimes, we know, because half of our students in our Espero program have to take actually annual leave to be able to attend the course. So they would not be able to advocate for themselves and to negotiate with their bosses to let them go for this training, because it's just communication, right? So, and on the other hand, we also have really excellent feedback from them, that even after 2 days of training, they are able to say, this was super important for me, I really learned a lot. And they would be emailing us and texting us months after the training, hey, I just had such a great conversation with the patient, and I was just using the techniques, and it really helped me so much. This is not me bragging here in front of you, it's just highlighting that it works. That communication is really a learnable skill that we can really teach and that can really be learned. And I think that's an important standpoint for us for the discussion today. If you have a boss like those who I was mentioning before, you can still use the data. Luckily, it's not only about nice stories, but it's also about evidence-based guidelines that actually are available today. We have many examples. I just picked up one from American Society of Clinical Oncology. These guidelines published in JCO are very clear about communication being super crucial skill for oncologists, and also saying that we need training for this. So it's maybe not that much about why, it should be more about how, when, and who will be doing this. But the fundamental question about do we want to do this has been already answered by, professional societies. So if we find some, struggle and some opposition, we can also use this data and these guidelines. If you just, look into it, I'm pretty sure that in most disciplines today, from pediatrics to geriatrics, you could find some evidence as well to support your arguments, and I will be sharing some of the data today with you. Right. So to summarize the why section, we know that poor communication leads to poor outcomes. There's a lot of data, there's some reviews here. I'm happy to share the articles with you afterwards if Jan has the email list of people who are here today or whatever. So we know that the poor communication really leads to poor outcomes of care. It complicates the decision-making process for families. It creates conflicts between healthcare staff and families and patients. We also know that there is a lack of education. I think we are doing quite a good job now in improving the situation at the medical schools here in the Czech Republic, but there is still a long way to go. And we also know that it should be part of standard training for those clinicians who are already in practice. It should be a lifelong, actually continuing education, as much as we are supposed to update our knowledge about CPR every, I don't know how often is it here in Motol, but every 2 years or 3 years or whatever. I can imagine, and we could also go to communication trainings at least once in 2 or 3 years, and I'm pretty sure that it would be helpful. Now, in our training, in the Espero program, we have had many really experienced senior physicians, and even them were able to say, yes, actually this was kind of helpful for me to just revalidate what I already know and do, and maybe also learn a few new tricks. So this is not about just being, a newbie in medicine. Okay, I forgot to start the clock, so Jan, I will be, watching you. Just let me know. Okay, thanks. So what should be actually the content of these, educational modules or educational programs? I'm just going back to the ASCO guidelines just for an inspiration from this field. These guidelines say that, communication skills training, thank you, should be based on sound educational principles and include and emphasize skills, practice, there is something here, right, experiential learning using role-play scenarios, but also direct observation of patient encounters, which I think is also important to figure out, and we will be talking about this, I guess, today. Of course, virtual patients are allowed, so don't worry about that. In terms of what are the skills that we should try to master, a recent publication from the amazing staff at Pittsburgh University Medical School can help us to just summarize what are the skills. I'm not sure if it's readable, hopefully so. They actually divide these into 3 categories of skills. The first category is cognitive skills involving information exchange, just actually how to lead the conversation and what should we be focusing on while we are doing this. So clinicians should be able to identify key decision makers, just kind of like organize themselves in the picture of the family. They should be able to check for understanding whether the patient is able to carry on with us and really understanding what we are trying to do with them. Engage in active reflective listening, eliciting patients' preferences and values. This is really important and challenging. I'm not sure how is it in all your countries, but here in the Czech Republic, many clinicians would still feel, okay, we are here to set up the plan for the patient, so we don't have to really to ask that many questions because we know what's actually good for them. So again, we see very often in the training that teaching clinicians to do this switch in their thinking can be challenging. The second group of skills are affective skills. So working with emotions. When we are talking about difficult communication, it actually comes with emotions. We can't really avoid them, and clinicians must be prepared to work with them. So we would always say, just be prepared for emotions. It can be all the kinds of emotional reactions, just to be prepared for them, And if we have 20 minutes for this conversation, it's good to be prepared that, we can spend few minutes on emotions, just be there with them, supporting the patient, using empathetic statements, supporting them, building rapport, and assure the patient that we are actually with them, that they are not alone. When the news are communicated poorly, it's very often by just giving the news to the patient and then leaving the room, and they would have to struggle with that, or they might actually ask the nurse afterwards. That's why I think communication training for other professionals is also important, not just physicians. And the last bit, the last group, which is actually the smallest in terms of the space that these authors gave it into the paper, and I think it also mirrors the clinical reality, are the cognitive skills involving information delivery, meaning how to actually say the things understandably, how to correctly use these, headlines that we saw as a technique from Vital Talk, how to actually not say too much, think about these things, how to present the data and the results without showing off all the, medical knowledge that you gathered throughout your training, but how to put it, clearly and in a way that would be understandable. I want to add 2 things to this section about what should be taught. I think we are very lucky that there are plenty of protocols that we can use nowadays. I'm sure that you know many of them. I think this is really important, and we get a lot of feedback from clinicians that it helps them to realize that there is a structure that they can follow. These conversations very often doesn't go as we planned. We might be really surprised by somebody jumping in with, unexpected question or emotions, or there can be a conflict among family members, and sometimes it's actually not easy conversation. I think it's not easy to lead, but sometimes it can be even more difficult, and knowing the structure and using those protocols can be really helpful, just not to get lost. So sometimes, I think most of these are from the States, so thank you very much, American medical community, for providing this. I know that in the States you would have protocols for everything in medicine, and just how to change your clothes or whatever. Just trying to be funny here, and nothing personal. But I think it's really actually great, so sometimes when we hear, this is just, American things, this doesn't work here, we are like, okay, let's try, and then we'll see. And usually people are kind of grateful afterwards that they have something that they can write down on their hands, or just have a card in their pocket just to, recap how to prepare for these conversations. And the last bit that I want to add to this content section is self-care. I think this is something that actually many of those protocols do not cover. And I think it's super important, because when we are teaching these skills to clinicians, very often at the end of the day, they would be like, wow, this was amazing. I learned a ton. It all makes sense to me. but how can I do this, You are actually pushing me to be there with patients and their families, in all those emotions. It's actually tough for me as well. I would rather skip, leave the room if I can. What shall I do afterwards? So I think that the good communication skills training should also include a session about self-care and what to do with yourself after you, had these conversations. We also know from that research that even students themselves report need for more feedback and emotional support, especially when they actually see actual patients. So when they can really feel about the responsibility and the pressure of being there with a real or virtual maybe person we will see in the future. Okay, and I knew that I will be short on time, so I will combine the last 3 W's together into section who, where, and when. Okay, if we agree that this is a good idea to train, who, where, and when should be doing this? We are at the medical school, so we can start with medical students. I'm sure that we would all agree that medical students actually can be taught these skills. They can actually be really happy about it. I would say that most experiences are very positive. Even here in the Czech Republic, from my experience and from experiences of other teachers at other schools that I'm aware of, it's mostly very positive. And, the students would evaluate these modules like, super excellent. And it's actually pretty easy to get complacent and feel like, okay, we did it. Thank you very much. And they are okay, good to go. It actually is not that easy. I've picked up a few studies that were measuring the students' satisfaction with these classes longitudinally, and I think this is important for us who are interested in this field, that students would very often say, this education was excellent, I really enjoyed that, when they were thinking or when they experienced class-based teaching, even if it was experiential, using role plays and all these things. But a few years later, when they're actually encounter first real patient, or they are supposed to do this on their own, they would feel, okay, this was actually not that much helpful. I would need some more support and more feedback from my teachers, how I'm actually doing this. So this is not about saying, skip the medical students' education, the class-based one, and do just in the clinical practice. But I think, at least for me, this is an inspiration to do this really longitudinally as an ongoing, process of developing skills, which should, mirror kind of the other developments that the medical students are going through during the medical school, as they are getting more exposure and more experience with, all those real situations. And definitely, it's also a point to carry on with the training after the medical school. I've heard that many times, when I was there sitting my first night shift, I was, so, scared that anything might happen and there was no one helping me out. So just, thinking about how we can provide this training even after the medical school. This is coming back to that thing that we already discussed, that most clinicians who are already out there didn't have the training. They were usually learning by just an examples of their colleagues and peers, which sometimes could be good, sometimes maybe not that good. And also the question who could be put the other way, thinking about who should be the teacher actually, who should be teaching this, what should we expect from these people. Again, the ASCO guidelines think even about these things, saying that teachers should have sufficient training and experience to effectively model and teach the desired communication skills and to facilitate experiential learning exercises. Okay, so it's not only about being skilled clinician, but it's also about being skilled teacher, because these things are, not that much used in medical training in other disciplines. So a very good teacher of surgery is not necessarily a very good teacher of communication, because there might be very specific techniques that could be used for this particular subject. And I think that we should really cover, as I said, both class-based education as well as clinical training. I think that's what we should really do. And in the classes, students are still able to learn the basic stuff, the theory, the structure. They can learn some techniques, but they need to join this with real experience of being there, sitting there, being, sweat, everywhere, and just, thinking about what should I do, and there is a real person actually suffering in front of me. Okay. Just the last bit, I already mentioned that, but I think multidisciplinary education is really important. I dare to say that many difficult communication in medicine are attended by more people than just physicians. We would have family conferences, nurses, social workers would be also very often in situations when they can help a lot, families and also physicians to go through this situation. So I wish, or I dream about the world where also in the training we can actually meet each other and learn about, each other perspectives, and also develop models where we can really support ourselves in clinical practice. Recently I've heard a nurse from one hospital here in Prague who told me, yes, we have these, beautiful rooms for delivering bad news in our hospital, but nurses are banned to go there. We just can't go there. It's only for physicians. I was like, okay, good luck, physicians, because I'm not sure if the room will help you. Perhaps nurses could help you even more than this beautiful room with pillows and pictures on the wall. So that's it. So thank you very much again for your attention, and I look forward to the discussion afterwards.
Thank you very much for a lovely talk. I just wanted to point out one of the things you mentioned, that we really need some more education for the trainers, because just because we communicate well doesn't mean that we are able to teach communication well. So this is maybe something we lack a lot, the trainer programs, because this is something we're struggling with in the Czech Republic quite a lot.
Thank you very much. I skipped that point, but it's also really important. And I think it's not only about having great teachers who will be running these courses. I think it's also about developing the skills for senior physicians in hospitals to be able to support, younger guys, younger people, younger colleagues. Also, as part of specialization training, I think, all of these mentors should be able to say, just along the way, hey, this conversation, how did it go? How did you feel? What was good? What not good? How can I help you to be better next time if you appreciate my feedback? So I think this would be really cool. But I dare to say that we have a problem with mentorship in general, at least in the Czech Republic. It's not only about developing communication skills, but also the clinical skills. I am afraid to say that it doesn't work very often as well as we would hope. So, but I agree with you completely. Yes, this is super important.
Oh, no, I was just applauding you bringing attention to that.
Okay.
We have time for another question? Or are there any other questions?
One question.
One question, if somebody is interested.
So you have mentioned it already here about the room and the physician. So you don't do this for nurses, yes? This program, because as you said, we have now visited few places where they do this peer program, and it's so important to include nurses. So is your program suited for them too? Or?
Thank you for the question. We had to adjust the program slightly for nurses. For example, we don't focus that much on communicating prognosis or delivering information about diagnosis and like this, standard bad news that we might think about. But all the work about working with emotions, supporting the family and the patient in this way, also about how to handle conflicts, how to handle those difficult questions that patients actually are asking nurses as well, is helpful for nurses a lot. And actually the program for nurses goes, super smoothly, and there are so many nurses really keen to do this training that, it's actually even more than in physicians. We struggle sometimes with getting enough physicians for training, but the one for nurses is always overcrowded.
This is one of the things also what we see here, that the competency of our nurses is a little bit like backshift, and in Western countries it's more, they really do a lot of these things, and it goes maybe together because the nurses can spend more time, and I think we also need to be very open in this, but this is a different area.
Yeah. I agree with you, but I think it's very often more about the fear than legal competencies. If you look at legislation, it doesn't say that nurses can't communicate with patients. Every person who is actually in the field relevant to those, information, actually has the right to be involved in the communication. So it's more about overcoming the, status quo and thinking about, okay, of course the nurse wouldn't be saying, the prognosis, but she can do so much, or he can do so much in all the other bits of the communication, which is, as helpful as the prognosis sometimes. Okay. Thanks.
Good. Thank you very much. And now it's time for another presentation. Dr. Julie Hauer with her presentation, Communication Challenges and Strategies Illustrated with Parents of Children with Severe Neurodisability. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. I'm really honored to be here. And Jan was so kind to say a shining star. I actually have to kind of downplay that I'm really amongst colleagues. And one of the beautiful things about presenting at international conferences, you just get reminded of great work done by many. And I also view when I'm giving discussions that I'm often reinforcing things that people are already doing while also offering up other considerations. So just in terms of my background, I'm going to be focusing on my area of expertise so that I can kind of hone down a little bit on unique challenges in communication specific to parents who have children with disorders of the central nervous system. I've been caring for that population for 28 years, and I've been in the role of pediatric palliative care for about 25 years. It really started initially very informally. It wasn't well developed in pediatrics yet, but that's really where my focus lies. And obviously in pediatric palliative care, communication is the essential skill. As I talk, I also want to have you think in terms of when we teach communication, it's really great to see this evolution where we're embedding it into the early phases of training in medical school, embedding it in residency, trying to achieve improved communication with senior faculty. And I really want to think of it as that everyone has a primary skill set, and then there's expert skill set within pediatric palliative care. And then the final thing is, I really think that when we're used to having multidisciplinary team discussions at time that get to the facts of the care we provide for patients. Ideally, we'll become more adept where part of that also is how can we best communicate and who's the best person to do it for the given circumstance. So my objectives for today are to develop a toolkit of communication strategies, define when, and as importantly, when not to have advanced care planning discussions, which obviously advanced care planning, which is anticipating what things might be in the future and what might make sense to use or not use. Sometimes parents don't have those discussions enough, and at other times they're revisited too often, and it can set up a different type of frustration for parents. And then finally, language strategies for families when prognosis is uncertain. So the other thing I want you to listen for is that I'm focusing on a patient population that has chronic conditions that cannot be cured, but can be modified for years, but then the modification can more insidiously start to decline. So it requires a different lens of looking. And I just want to point that out because this is where I focus, given that a lot of the literature is focused on children and adults with cancer in which the trajectory is different. Just in terms of a definition, a severe neurological impairment is defined as children who have disorders of the central nervous system that results in both motor and cognitive impairment. So that's the disability side. But in addition, they also have medical complexity. So a lot of this, I'm just restating what Martin has already described, in that goals of communication aren't about giving information as the starting point. The starting point is that we develop trust with the family that we're talking with. They're not going to be able to hear what we are sharing if they don't trust that we have their child's best interest at heart. The second part is asking and then listening with intention so that we can then recalibrate the communication. And to me, this is a really important reason why strategies in communication that get at those opportunities to test drive communication skills. And I love now learning that this effort to have a virtual approach to that learning. But it's so important so that we can start by such basic steps of how do parents prefer to hear information? So an example would be some parents will say up front, I want it very straightforward, I want really honest information, just give it to me. Other families will say, I feel like I'm always getting bad news, I also want to know the good news. And so again, this is such an important part of recalibrating. If we don't meet them where they're at. And then the second part is in pediatrics, especially in children who are unable to ever have the cognitive ability to describe their experience, we're dependent on parents to help us learn about their child. And so the importance of understanding the child through the parent's perspective and respecting and validating that perspective. And then obviously conveying information. And then the final part I did want to highlight is that I think it's important early in training that we acknowledge there will be what for you as an individual feel like communication failures. The more complex, but we can also reframe it that if we have a longitudinal relationship, we'll kind of sort that out. If we have a point in time with a parent, we won't know the impact of that conversation. It might be that they weren't at a point to process it more with you as a person they have less contact with, but it might have planted a seed that is really impactful later. So we can help normalize the experience. And then I just want to, this is kind of reiterating again, but really those core strategies in communication that embed trust. So validating the parent perspective, which is so important because historically, the physicians really did approach it that we know best and often either, often not so overtly, but would indicate that they didn't really believe the parent perspective. Align with parent preference. So a parent might have a preference for something to be done. We can still offer up an honest reflection on why that might or might not make sense to use, but again, validating that preference that a parent has. And then I'm going to go through a few other components here with cases. I will share that when I get to the cases, I'm not going to give much medical detail. All I'm going to do with each one is really highlight a specific type of communication strategy that can be used in different circumstances. So it's kind of developing that toolkit of communication. This happens to be actually a mnemonic that I didn't see earlier. I chose it because it aligns with some of the points I've already made, and it's the value mnemonic. So value, or I add in there, validate what the parent is saying, acknowledge the emotions, and we'll come to a bit about emotions, listen, understand where the family is coming from. So again, that importance of respecting the perspective as valid. And then finally, we do have to identify ways to elicit questions from family so that we know what they understand as well. And then the one other thing, so I don't forget to share it, I'm going to give one example where I even give example of communication. One thing I also think helps is to think, I have my rule for myself that I'm not perfect with, but I try to keep statements to 3 sentences. So the idea being hone down complex information into what is the key detail to communicate so as to pace information and also assure we're not talking too much, and then we give these stop points for reflection back for a true shared conversation. I did want to start with highlighting hope. Parents make statements that historically were viewed as a family not getting how serious their child's condition is. And there's some beautiful literature that has really reframed those statements as reflecting hopeful statements that are both adaptive for a parent, so it allows them to still have hope for the outcome they know not to expect, but it allows an individual to cope with the adversity that they're facing in terms of what is happening with their child and the loss they may be experiencing in the future. And then hope is also affirming. So when a parent shares a hopeful statement, they're affirming to the parent is affirming to the physicians their love that they have for their child, and to themselves they're restating their love for their child in that affirming statement. So, and I'll give an example of kind of validating hope. And then finally, for pediatrics, and I know this is true in adults too, but there can be difficult circumstances where the wrong focus is. So it might be that a parent is described as being difficult or very needy. And the benefit of reframing so that that the circumstance is difficult, not the individual. And that often means that there's an unmet need. It could be, again, that basic, that the parent doesn't yet feel heard or that their perspective is valued. It might be that it's an individual who comes from a marginalized point within society where they feel more insecure. And the parent might have past traumatic experience that has an impact on how they interface with us as professionals. And so being respectful for that. And then kind of getting at this, I'm going to talk about information need versus emotional need. I did want to give just a quick framework that is part of my work, and it's looking at when individuals have a chronic condition without cure, but that condition without cure can be modified over time. And this is very relevant for children with severe neurological impairment. That there are these points in time where there can be acute decline, which tends to be the greater focus, and there can be other points in time where there's initially this very insidious decline in various aspects that impact health and quality of life for the child. The first point here is that I always call this as a child having, maintaining, or returning to a point of thriving that a parent perspective says is a good level of thriving. Thriving being that desired level of health and quality of life. One thing I won't go through today, but I'll be talking about more on Friday, is specific details that then can allow us to give a better, honest reflection of a framework when we expect it's possible for baseline to be restored. It's possible for a good baseline to be achieved, even if it's not the prior baseline. And when is it possible that the problem is intractable and likely to be irreversible? So it's looking at what else can we try? What's the impact of trying that? And then one part of communication is eliciting goals and values from parents. So now I'm going to use just brief cases, but what I really want to do is just highlight this toolkit of communication strategies that are more specific. The first one I wanted to start with really gets at this important aspect of emotions and how to understand when there's emotional content. So this was something that I've been incorporating in more over the years, and it's this distinction between when a statement reflects an information need and when a statement reflects an emotional need. For clinicians, so the physicians, they're more apt to hear something as being an emotional need. I do think nurses are more apt to be able to recognize when it's an emotional need. So the example I just wanted to highlight, it's a parent who keeps requesting tests and interventions, and the repeated requests are resulting in an escalation of conflict between the parent and the clinicians. When we were consulted as a palliative care team, we kind of teased out how much of this is emotion versus the mom needing more information, because up until then, it was really focused on why that's not going to help, why we don't need to do that. So this is just giving some examples of communication. So validating the parent as a good parent. You are a good mom to ask for tests that might give answers. It must be hard to not have easy answers for the tests that have been done. Tell us more about that. Or the next example, you are a good advocate for your daughter Grace. It must be hard to see that Grace's problems don't have easy answers and don't respond to the interventions that the physicians are using. It is natural to want to try more interventions. In this case, it took time and a supportive presence, but really it ultimately teased out that mom was eventually able to express She actually felt like she was failing her daughter. And the best way that she felt she could love her daughter was to keep asking for more things to be tried. And that she had lost hope that her daughter would get better. So that naturally was a point of being very angry, and because she wasn't getting what she needed. And really the point here is, until that emotion had been processed, it's not possible to start grappling with the information that's relevant to her daughter. So again, information need versus emotional need. I just wanted to use this case as an example where not only is it building trust, aligning, the process of revisiting, but also time, and time as an ally. So this is a 16-year-old with SNI, very complex medical circumstance. He's having increased hospitalizations and now a very prolonged hospitalization. And it gets at this need for increasing ventilation use. The medical team has an advanced care plan discussion, and the mother was very angry. She says, "You're always asking me about resuscitation, and you've gotten it wrong before." So there wasn't yet trust established. This was a point when palliative care was consulted. The first point I just want to highlight here, this was a 9-month process. And hearing me talk about it, it sounds very rational. It was hard, especially the first couple of months of building that trust and rapport, and being able to see that we're both coming from a shared perspective. And so it was a process where really kind of defining what is the key goal that will help guide us. It was a process of working with medical team so that it was demonstrating we are committed to his best outcome possible and to that improvement to have those good quality days. There was a temporary point where that goal was achieved, and that was celebrated as, again, a way to show trust. We're not here just to give him a peaceful death. We're here to give him the best life possible. And then as there was this insidious change that was initially hard for mom to hear, there was still an honest reflection on what that might mean. And then the hardest point was the honest reflection by phrasing that his medical interventions that have given him a great life over many years, now really acknowledging in an honest manner, I am worried that that benefit is being lost and is no longer meeting the benefit it has provided in the past. And then how that can open up further impactful discussions. This was just a really beautiful example to show the power of hope. So this is a 6-month-old who 3 months earlier had a very severe anoxic event. At the point of being consulted, there was no improvement in his neurological status. There were no limits, this is the initial information we get, no limits in resuscitation. So the first meeting, because of parents, when you think about it, for medical clinicians, they know that 3 months out, that we already have a good prediction of the child's outcome. 3 months for a parent who has lost who their child will be is a blip in time. And so really starting with a hopeful approach. So the parents did share, we think she'll get better. So the response was, I too have the same hope. We will all work towards her having the best care to allow what is possible to happen. And we will always support that hope. But also acknowledging, it's all kind of like a warning shot, when it's necessary, we will also give information in an honest manner. So just a quick kind of summary of the process. There were, over a 4-month time period, these new features that were indicating further neurodegeneration that can occur after very severe anoxic events. So there was information where we could reflect on, again, those points of we're going to try to modify these problems, but we can't cure these problems. And also being able to acknowledge that the worry at times that what this was telling us about grace, but also committed to the treatment being used. So at the 4-month mark, she presented with what would clinically be an acute ileus event. But what was important at this time is, based on the prior information of CNS decline, is to be able to demonstrate commitment to making the problem better, acknowledgement sometimes it can be transient, but then being able to name that the problem is another problem that can occur when the brain is failing. And so naming that changes in brain function can cause the intestines to shut down. Though there is no test to confirm, that prior history tells us that that's what's occurring for Grace right now. So after she passed peacefully 4 days later, and we were doing a post-event follow-up just to allow a parent to process, one thing we were processing is really the decision not to hospitalize and try further interventions, and the value of allowing her to pass peacefully. I was very struck how they reflected back, we could trust you because you allowed us to have hope at the beginning. So again, the power of hope. Another tool for communication is the strategy of I wish, I worry, I wonder. So in this boy's circumstance, he had 6 hospitalizations over 5 months. And the way that this was reflected on, where it included neurology, palliative care, his mother and one of his sisters who was very actively involved in kind of her hope for her brother's outcome, is there was a point to be able to just acknowledge that the parent was describing how those hospitalizations were just having a greater burden on her son, but she wasn't ready to give up on him. How it was summarized back after a long discussion is, I wish we could make his problems, we could stop his problems from occurring again. In this case, it was very intensive interventions for his prolonged seizures. So I wish we could stop this from happening. I worry this is no longer possible. And again, the importance of having this other subspecialty expert involved. I wonder, and then I wonder is a chance to offer up options to how care can look based on mom's worry about the impact of hospitalization. I wonder if we could focus on a treatment protocol where we don't place an IV, we give enteral medications by G-tube, we don't do tests, and we figure out a way to get him home sooner with the tapering of the benzodiazepines that do stop the seizures each time. But it wasn't possible to really initiate it in the home setting. And then another one was that was explored later after that first part was kind of teased out and a care plan put together. I wonder if it makes sense not to use intubation, given that it won't prevent these problems from recurring, and given the other problems that are occurring at this point in his life. So it wasn't asking, it was helping to frame why it makes sense not to use the given intervention. In his case, the first 6 months were stressful, but it had a major impact so that he really did achieve a significant improvement in quality of life for the next 2 years of his life. This one, I just want to quickly highlight the benefit of also honestly reflecting on best and worst case scenario. And again, to do this in a brief manner, this is a 14-year-old with a genetic condition. And with that genetic condition, it's described that it can result in these recurrent vomiting episodes, so a category we call cyclic vomiting syndrome. At the point of meeting him, what we also, very aggressively evaluated and with a subspecialist involvement, what we identified is that coexisting with that was some kind of mild agitation and pain even between episodes. And I just want to kind of take that framework I provided earlier and think in terms of 3 stages in his life that made sense to use. So in the first stage, because he has otherwise well-controlled problems, well-controlled seizures on one medication, which is amazing, and not many other problems, it was approached that this might be symptoms related to his impaired nervous system. We will start, and there was a discussion about starting gabapentin, and that was framed as, I expect benefit, I just can't guarantee it. So again, it's coming up with a framework of a way to convey information in a very straightforward manner. Because the problem can't be cured, I can't promise, but I can also frame that I expect it. 3 years later, he had a fracture and required orthopedic surgery. After that, in the weeks to follow, his pain and vomiting returned. There was no new source to explain it. It didn't improve with an increase in the gabapentin dose. So there was a discussion about adding a second medication because he had such great benefit from the first neuropathic pain drug. The second time, it was framed as it's possible to improve his baseline and achieve a good level of thriving. But it may not be as good as previously. So again, now this is reshifting the framework of we can modify, but we cannot cure the problem. We're adding a second medication that makes it still possible to achieve a good outcome, but it's more probable we won't achieve to the degree we want. In fact, as parents reflected back very easily, that makes sense to us. We know to expect that we can't have everything guaranteed. That happened to provide great benefit. Then 5 years later, at a time where there were other new changes occurring and symptoms were remaining intractable to the next interventions, it was reframed now to, I don't anticipate further improvement with the other interventions we have. I'm worried that his problems are greater than our best treatment. And so again, it's changing the framework of communication on the child's condition in an honest way and with a consistent approach so that parents aren't having to, without that framework, I've seen parents in the past where it feels like we just have to keep trying interventions because the focus is always on treatment. And then the final thing I want to say, I've just come up on time, is when to revisit advanced care planning. So this was such a poignant example. So we were meeting a parent for the first time. Her son had severe anoxic injury, and the team was worried about his clinical status. When we were having some discussions, it was very interesting how the mom reflected back, I don't believe in mights. It does not help to consider what might happen. We needed to kind of verify what she meant by that, and she could just acknowledge, I focus on how well he will do when more interventions are added. But what we did is we didn't stop there. We still did reflect on, is there a circumstance that you could envision that when you would want to kind of rethink what interventions are being used by the medical team. And so she very clearly could say, if we cannot keep him comfortable, that's when I want to talk again. So then we had an established, agreed upon, it's kind of like an informal contract. If that occurs, we'll talk, but we also did acknowledge if there's another circumstance that the clinicians know they can't make better with their best treatment, that'll be another reason why we'll talk again. And that's that important part where to ensure that parents are having opportunities to reflect on where their child's at, but we're not also repeating them so that they feel like everyone's questioning the value of their child's life. And for me, my simple question is, what is different now compared to when decisions were last made? And then still monitoring for when to revisit those discussions again. So thank you so much. Děkuji vám is my best. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. One question is possible if it's somebody interested.
I think it went to 20 minutes.
Okay, everybody are too shy? Or
Thank you. Thank you, Julie, for a lovely speech. I wrote down a couple of things and your thoughts, and I loved it really very much. I wanted to comment on one of the last slides when you mentioned that this mom was saying it does not help to consider what might happen. I think this is I'm really happy you mentioned it, because sometimes we as physicians we might consider this as a limitation for us, how not to talk to our parents. And, you know, it makes me think of maybe reframing this as an invitation for us, how to build trust with this family. Maybe if we go this way, she invites us. Maybe if we respect her wishes, this could help us to build trust. So it really made me think this way, and thank you for mentioning this.
And just one other comment about that is sometimes we'll hear a parent say, I want everything done, and that is just an invitation to better explore what that means. And that so thank you for highlighting that. And the other point that was trying to be made there is that that's not right, not a point to stop conversation. It's to better align with the parents so that they know where their ally in thinking through where their son's at, but also being respectful of their view of that there is nothing to change right now until there's something else that changes. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I can speak this way as well. The last presentation, Dr. Daniel Hodulík, Communication Barriers in Healthcare.
Tak já moc děkuju za pozvání Janovi zejména. Moc díky skvělým předřečníkům, protože mám zase jako velkou radost z toho, že se skrze to, co děláte vy všichni tady, tak se bude zlepšovat poskytování zdravotní péče nejenom v České republice. Centrum dohody. My se vlastně
a center of agreement, let's say. And for 25 years we have been working on the development of communication and cooperation facilities such as hospitals. We have a lot of representatives of palliative care here, and I would like to thank them all for helping us to make things work. Because it's a great example of how the provision of healthcare can look, and I think palliative care is a kind of a pioneer that shows that things can be done in a different way, and I would like to thank you for that. It's been mentioned several times that it's necessary to implement all these things into our education programs, into our education models. That's correct. Very often at our hospitals, when you have lectures by senior physicians, or when we organize a lecture, then senior physicians come to us and they say, "Oh, we don't really need this because we are very good at communicating, but we are curious and that's why we are here." And for us, it's really difficult to get these people to our lectures, to make them come to our lectures. This is, for me, maybe the most difficult part of our job. And very often I hear that, you know, the problems start at the very top. That means we keep developing the young generation, but the current physicians who are, let's say, 40 at the moment, which is much younger than me, and I'm not going to retire yet. These physicians who are 40 years will be communicating for 25 years in the hospital in the future, so we should work on them as well. And as Martin said, mentoring could be one of the possibilities how to improve the situation. People who are good in treating people should have an opportunity to pass their experience to their to younger colleagues, because sometimes you can even see reversed mentoring where younger people are able to teach older colleagues how to communicate. But I would like to say something about our activities. What we have been working on is education of physicians in the field of communication, because we have no physicians on our team. And before we start teaching someone, we discuss our topics with the individual physicians and nurses, and we talk to them about what their work looks like, what kind of situations they work in. And very often we find out that a lot of medical staff have no managerial education. And if you have medical or non-medical healthcare staff who actually work in managing positions, be it like managing nurses or managing physicians, or even the heads of departments and so on, then very few of these people have actually had any kind of manager education. And if they had this education, they would have been confronted with the topic of communication. And as I said, we try to support our more experienced physicians, and we try to offer education programs for them, and we also offer support programs for patients and their families. We focus on the development of medical teams, and we also prepare educational materials and documents for patients and for medical staff as well. As of today, or actually, when we look back, we can say that more than 8,000 people have participated in our trainings, and I'm talking about medical trainings only, because we are active in our business fields as well. My presentation today is not about figures and facts. Rather, I would like to talk about our experience of many years. And I would like to talk about why communication is so important for medical teams. Sometimes I think that it would be great to transfer what we have in palliative care to other fields as well, to create multidisciplinary teams where, so that everybody can, look outside the box and think outside the box, to get a broader perspective. Because if you have a broader perspective, it increases the quality of care for the patient. And in the past months and years, we have also been working on an improvement of processes at hospitals. In hospitals, you can very often see a high level of stress, and if everybody communicates in a good way, it can decrease the stress level, because, if there's less stress, burnout effects are less likely to happen, and so on. And why is all this so difficult? Because here it's easy, because you have a guy standing in the front who is saying something about how you should work in your practical life, but sometimes it's really difficult to apply theory in practice. Well, let's talk about stress. If you have stress, you are not really able to listen. You are not willing to listen. And, if there is an operation or an acute situation, which happens basically every day in a hospital, then listening is necessary. But sometimes, due to stress, listening is kind of hampered. And if you're not willing to listen to your colleagues, then your colleagues could get irritated. And then there's another aspect that we have to bear in mind, and that is hierarchy. Because hierarchy is, again, something that
občas učím ty.
Sometimes I give workshops for the leaders of the Czech healthcare system, and I try to give them open feedback. And very often they tell me, "Well, you are the first person to give me a feedback of this kind," and I find that really surprising because you know they have been doing their job for 30 years. They should have received a lot of feedback during that time. But in most cases, these people are happy to receive open feedback from me. Okay, there are cases where I am too open, so to say, and they are not so happy. But you know, I always hope that they will understand it at a later stage, maybe. And we have to bear in mind that efficient communication decreases the risk of mistakes and errors. So what are the barriers in communication? We can talk about the barriers on the side of the medical staff. We can talk about barriers on the side of the patient. But very often, you know, the point is a conflict between these two sides. So what are the classical barriers, the typical barriers in medical terms, in medical teams? The problem is that each physician or nurse speaks, so to say, the language of his or her tribe. You know, sometimes when I give trainings or workshops for nurses and physicians, and if they are from various departments or various disciplines, you can see that they don't really understand each other because they speak different languages. And you know, in the world of medical services, there's a lot of distraction and time pressure. You know, physicians and nurses will very often tell you, we don't have time to communicate, and that's what Martin talked about. But, you know, you don't need so much more time to communicate, because usually it's just a few seconds or a few minutes. And, you know, the time that you invest into communication can bring you a lot of benefits. And sometimes, you know, you are not aware of the fact how big these benefits can be. And, you know, it's important that physicians read all these studies that actually bring evidence that, you know, good communication improves the quality of healthcare. Moreover, there are differences in expertise and this hierarchy that I talked about. You know, because when there's a professor or a doctor, then the other employees are afraid to tell something to this person. And I'm not trying to use the title of doctor or professor as a bad thing here. And on a daily basis, we can see medical staff who are really stressed out, who feel anxious, and who are afraid to make a mistake. And you know, their focus on performance is a negative influence on communication, you know, because they focus on performance and they neglect communication. And sometimes the problem is that people are not able to formulate a question or ask the right question because they fear that they will lose their status quo, that they will lose their face. Because, you know, people think, oh, I'm an experienced guy, so I shouldn't ask a question like this. That asking a question like this could make me look stupid. Another point are unclear competences. You know, the division of competences, let's say, between nurses and physicians. If I'm a nurse, who am I supposed to listen to in the first place? To the head nurse or to the physician? Who should be the, you know, main person for me whom I should obey, so to say? Another point is a lack of communication skills. And as has been mentioned, very often communication is not part of the curricula at faculties of medicine. So what are the typical barriers in communication between medical staff and patients? Well, in the first place, it's the language. That means, you know, adapting your communication style to the patient, to their age, intelligence, or education level. You definitely need empathy, and people have various levels of empathy. Another point is time pressure and high workload. And I'm not trying to say that physicians have nothing to do. No, we have a lack of physicians, of course, and they work under a lot of pressure. And at the same time, we need new departments at our hospitals, and we still lack new physicians, so obviously there's a lot of workload. At the same time, all these people have to work with their own emotions. And sometimes, I hear that people at hospitals say, "Oh, we are a hospital, we are not Google, so we don't want to talk about soft skills." Please not. Don't do that. But that's a problem. Moreover, very often people focus on their own expertise, on their own field of specialization. Plus, there's a lot of distraction in the environment, and there's more and more administrative agenda that you have to take care about. And there's no systematic solution for this, because sometimes, physicians have to do administrative tasks that could be done by someone else. Now let's look at the communication barriers on the patient side. Sometimes it's the worry or the fear about the future. This is again something that decreases or reduces your cognitive skills. Plus, patients experience a certain kind of physical discomfort, which again is an influence on communication. And again, there is selective focus on what I actually want to hear. I as a patient want to hear good news. That's why I focus on the good parts of the information. Very often people have difficulties asking open questions. It's elementary school stuff, but people are not able to do that as adults. So, ask open questions. Or sometimes people just don't know what kind of questions they should ask. Situations where the patient doesn't know what to ask because the physician is not communicating in a good way. Another point is, embarrassment about revealing too much about my private life. And very often I hear from physicians that the patients are afraid that they would bother the physicians with too much information. That they say, an important point only when they are leaving the hospital or something like that. Despite the fact that it's something that should be mentioned when talking to the physician. Since we don't have so much time, I will skip one of the slides. We wanted to help our healthcare system, and we wondered what we could do for medical staff apart from giving workshops about communication. And one of the things that we did is that we developed an app called AirTalk. We were inspired by Vital Talk, which is a similar app focused or designed for palliative care, but we wanted to have something that would be designed not only for palliative care, but for the healthcare system in general. We were aware of the fact that a lot of medical staff are not really motivated to read studies in English or to use English-speaking apps. And that is why we created this app, which has 3 interfaces. And it tells you how you can communicate with a patient, how you can communicate with their family, and how you can communicate with your colleagues. The app is obviously available for free in App Store or in Google Play. And I will just briefly describe our app, because these are all things that you will see in the app if you download it. But what I wanted to say is that our app is basically a kind of first aid, it's the basis. For a situation where you say, I have a difficult situation now, but I don't have any books on me, so I will just look at my mobile phone. because you have all these communication models that give you a certain structure for communication in certain situations, but these are not always available. You don't remember them all the time. But here you have something similar available on our app. When you are, for example, going to talk to your colleague or to the head of your department, and you maybe don't know how to say it, but you know that you want to say it, and the app is something that can help you, that can give you inspiration. So, as I said, in the app you have these three fields or areas, and if we look at the area of talking with a colleague, you have hints or tips about giving feedback, and you even have a model situation there, an example situation. And if you want to read more on this topic, you will find references to literature and to articles that deal with these issues. But that's not why I'm here. I'm not here to, make an advertisement for our app. I just wanted to mention it. What I wanted to talk about in the first place is that I wanted to say that I know how important communication in healthcare is, and that I'm very happy that we can support our medical and non-medical staff in the development of soft skills, be it communication skills, which is a broad term, and it includes conflict resolution and many other topics as well. So I would like to say thank you for this opportunity, and I'm very happy to be able to help you in any kind of way, be it a presentation, be it an app, be it the support that we provide to palliative care centers, or through other means, for example, through virtual reality. And thank you very much for that.
Thank you very much for Daniel Hodulík. I'm trying to avoid the light and other things. So questions, if you would like to propose any question, that's time for that before presentation of virtual reality. The length of the microphone is
Dobrý den, já jsem Valachovičová, já znám Centrum dohody 25 let.
Good afternoon. I am a huge fan of you. I've known you for 20 years. The app is great. And I think that you should have talked about it more, and we should spread the information and share it on our social networks because it's brilliant. But my question is, I have lived through a cultural shock because I returned to the Czech Republic from foreign countries where the discussion is a bit different, because if I'm right, the app is for us, for healthcare workers. Isn't there a way to help to the general public so that their part of the conversation would also become closer to what we expect, and if they could have some sort of way how to react if, I don't know, a doctor is rude, so I don't want to be described as a non-compliant patient. Thank you very much for your question. So, there are many ways, many things we try to do. One of them is we founded the Czech Association of Mentoring, and what we try to do is to work with companies as well. The communication skills, the soft skills are very similar. Regardless of what you do, it's very similar in business to what you need in healthcare. So using that experience is a way, and it's happening already. An example from palliative care, where, I don't know, banks, one of them supports through mentoring various hospices. This is happening already. Of course, we are at the beginning, but we are humble. Again, another possible mistake on our behalf. It would be great if I could come here and tell you, please download the app, it's brilliant. But I can't do it. We don't do marketing. We're not good at it when we do it. And it's great spreading the information and not being that humble. Because we and you do a lot of great things that sometimes is mentioned on LinkedIn once, but that's it. But on a more optimistic note, it's improved vastly because we are on our good way. We make good. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about the good things we do. We help. Let's not feel ashamed for it. Let's not try to hide it as well. About the app, we know it's about its limitations. It's a pilot project. Our capacity is not good enough. We work on it. There are many things missing. I don't know how to communicate with a patient who might have some suicidal tendencies. There are some patients who do not fit into some of these subgroups we have created. So we plan to improve on the app. There are plans on videos being in it, and it's a good idea to try to approach the public as well from their perspective. How to ask a good question to a doctor, for example, a good open question, so that they do not hide and they answer. So thank you very much. We will try to work on that.
2 options. Another question, please enjoy. I hope.
A ja ďakujem veľmi pekne za tú prezentáciu.
Thank you very much for the presentation. This is what I deal with on a daily basis, the whole spectrum. In Slovakia, I must say that we don't know about the work you do, so thank you very much for actually seeing it, at least here. So do you plan on working in Slovakia? You can download the app in Slovakia, of course. But the mentoring, the education. Today, I feel that it's quite hard to actually do something in the healthcare industry. Sometimes there's a lack of motivation. Nurses would love to do something, for example, and I was at a university hospital, one of the big hospitals here in Prague. There were many people who came, doctors came, nurses came. Of course, there were more nurses than the doctors. It's difficult. I feel that what we need is to try to get the healthcare workers on our side, because there are more and more complaints about communication in hospitals, I think. So the need for better communication is here, and what we try to do is to approach the heads, because what we do is we try to help on the development of the leaders in healthcare. Perhaps sometimes somebody notices and says, this is what we would need, this is what would help us. We know about Slovakia, we have many students from Slovakia here in the Czech Republic, but we haven't found many ways to Slovakia, I must admit.
Hello, everybody. We are very happy that you are still here, or if you come now, so enjoy our roundtable discussion. This panel will be related to difficult communication in healthcare. We have the same presenters as panelists, so I have the great pleasure of introducing them. Professor Alexandra Kolenová, Head of the Department of Pediatric Hematology and Oncology, National Institute of Children's Disease, Bratislava, is just here. Next to her is another lady, Dr. Julie Hauer. Julie Hauer is a physician at 7 Health Long-Term Care Facility for Children in the Massachusetts area. Dr. Hauer has more than 20 years of experience caring for children with nervous system disorder, as well as she is an assistant professor of pediatrics, Harvard Medical School, Boston. Thank you very much that you are still here. Dr. Daniel Hodulík is at the end of the table, senior consultant, Centrum Dohody Prague. Welcome. And Dr. Martin Loučka, assistant professor in medical psychology, Third Faculty of Medicine, Charles University, Prague, founder and director, Center for Palliative Care, also Prague, and board member, European Association for Palliative Care, Brussels. Welcome. So thank you again, and let me propose first question. We are going to have approximately, okay, not approximately, we have just 1 hour. Included your questions. My first question is, how and where did you learn how to deliver serious news and communicate with patients and family members? Ladies, who won't be first? Profesorka Kolenová. Thank you.
I'm trying to think. So, can you hear me?
It's allowed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, as I have mentioned in the beginning of my presentation, so I just learned it from my maybe colleagues in the hospital. I started to work in the pediatrics. In that time, when I started to work, it was still time when sometimes we took children and mothers could not be there. So it was really bad news to deliver that we have to depart. So this was one of my, and I was just learning this by myself. And then it was the St. Anna Kinderspital in Vienna when I the first time seen that the psychologist was organizing the first talks. So this was very nice experience to see this. And then in mobile hospice Plamienok in Slovakia, I did several workshops and also how to be with the families. So these were my experiences.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Doctor.
So I finished my training 30 years ago, and then I started 2 years later caring for children with disorders of the nervous system. So that meant not only did I not have any training, there was no training at the time. So I learned from trial and error, and because I was pursuing the role of palliative care, about 25 years ago as a starting point, that meant that it also involved exploring how communication can be better used. And so it's also important to know that that means that my skills continue to grow over the past 10 years. I feel like I'm still fine-tuning, and obviously part of that is because it involves also being in a role of kind of teaching some of the skills. So it's a work in progress throughout the entire time.
Okay.
Loučka.
So I'm a psychologist, so I actually do not deliver bad news in terms of saying prognosis, saying diagnosis, but I dare to say that actually I learned how to be there with people who are receiving bad news, or how to be present during these conversations, and that's, I think, what I was trying to mention also previously, that's a role of allied health care professionals to be there also for patients and families who might ask those questions. What does it mean to me after physicians left? What now with my life? He told me such a huge news. Oof, I'm overwhelmed. I don't know what to do. So in these situations, I still consider kind of like useful to be there. And having said that, I also had the chance to attend the training in Plamienok in Slovakia and in some other courses at Harvard Medical School. You also run palliative care education and practice course, which is very well and really oriented on delivering bad news. Some other courses, but I think that the step one is to realize what's my place in these conversations. How can I help, and then to tailor the education to this role that we have.
My apologies for doing this. The one thing I wanted to share is that one thing I'm struck by, because I kind of practiced early on, so to speak, meaning I had to do the work and have honest communication. But the thing I was struck by is parents, and I can imagine adults also, that they're actually very forgiving when they know that you're basing it on trust. You're sincere, it's genuine, but you might be in an early phase of getting it wrong sometimes, and that I think is another part that helps remind people that it doesn't have to be perfect. It's being present is the more important part.
Mm-hmm. Daniel Hodulík, where did you study? You will speak Czech.
I'm as well not practical. I'm not saying the negative prognosis or whatever. I am a consultant and I am a member of a great team in Centrum Dohody, which is the development and consulting company. So I never speak to the patient or personally, but like my practice, if we are training these things about the feedback and through the trainings, and I'm learning this as well, like day by day. So I don't know whether I'm answering your question.
And where did you exactly learn it? Where?
Yes, I'm a psychologist as well. So in the school, I got the like basic information about that, and but in Centrum Dohody we are giving a big focus for developing ourselves. So this way.
How did you?
Can I just add one thought, please? I'm just wondering that perhaps we should all said that we learned this, in our families or, when we were grown-ups, because, we just discussed this in the break, that, this is something what we all do. We all do this, in our lives. And I think that we are actually using these patterns that we saw our parents doing or other people, our mentors, teachers in school, giving us, bad news about the results of our tests or whatever. So I think we should also think about this. And I was really struck by your comment about your daughter in the Netherlands. I still think about it. We should really start something like that, because this is not only about special course, how to deliver bad news. It's about how we behave to each other with respect and, interest or not.
Okay, if may I allow, how was it in your families?
Comment on that.
If you wanted to mention anything else, it's okay. Thank you.
And this gets at another aspect of communication, which is culture. So I grew up in Minnesota, which is a mid-northern state in the United States, and the immigrant population that was very dominant there until the last 50 years was Scandinavian and Northern Germanic. And I lived in northern Minnesota, which is, I'm not Scandinavian, my family isn't, but the culture is. And so that meant in our family, we didn't communicate. It was that, so I had to become comfortable with making a statement and being more directive as opposed to being very cautious in how to communicate, because the worst offense I learned was to offend somebody and to avoid, so you don't communicate because you don't want to have that occur. So it's like having family mention, because we have to also recognize what influences us and then how to expand those skills.
Professor Kolenová.
Yeah, so I wanted to add it before, but this is all together connected. When you mentioned my daughter, and then you meant this reverse mentoring, so I really see with my daughters, because we were 1 year in States, and my children went to the school there, I could compare these differences. And when my 7 years old girl she was in the first year, and they had a parent-teacher conference, and she was supposed to do the feedback. She had a flower with the leaves, and she was supposed to talk about herself, and she said, "Oh, not always I'm listening to the teacher. Sometimes I'm not nice to my friends." And the teacher corrected her, and they were learning to do feedback inside of the class. So it was first time I've seen it, how you can start with the children. And also when we were talking about delivering bad news, I remember when I was a young doctor and my older colleague told to one mother, she wanted to talk about her child and the prognosis, and the doctor told her, "You are here on the right place. and he left. And it was on a corridor, and then I went to St. Anna Kinder Hospital, and I've seen 1 hour discussion with the multidisciplinary team. So there were 2 ends. Like how you find this way, like we all are learning. Yeah, but also, as you mentioned, in our families, I am from north part of Slovakia, where people were working a lot on the fields and not talking so much or not expressing emotions. So
not expressing emotions.
Not expressing
very
emotions.
Often. Okay. You don't want to mention any other information. Okay, what can make communication with a patient or a family member challenging? I know that's a question for doctors, and you can also mention your experiences according to your point of view to psychologists. Julie Hauer, or yes.
Do you want to start, or I can?
We can maybe explain. I can ask you the question in my No. So one of the things that you mentioned, it's like how we establish the trust. So to establish the trust with the family, and one of the challenging things also in Slovakia, the culture, healthcare system, people think it's not working very well. So really when we have a new child with some diagnosis, I have 50 telephone calls from all kind of parts of Slovakia trying to tell me that we should take good care of this child. So first aim is really to get trust with the family, and we have established this first talk as I have seen it. So we have not the first day, but we do it during the first 10 days when we see the family is a little bit after the shock. So we invite father, mother, siblings are always of course patient if they want to, grandparents, and anybody from the family can come, and we try to be the multidisciplinary team. So is the doctor, specialist, young doctor who is learning, and psychologist, social worker, and we have a chaplain now too. So we did as a standard of care, and we do it first talk for all our pediatric cancer patients, and then the family can request such a meeting anytime they want. And we do it if the results are not good and it's a progression of the disease. So if it's going to the way we see we cannot cure the child, so we trust to maintain and establish the trust inside of the family. And what we do, we try to be transparent. Like you mentioned, the doctor is not a god. So and we want that everybody in our multidisciplinary team understand what was delivered to the family, and then also nurses are more comfortable when they know what's going on, and psychologists and social workers. So we try to be transparent. Sometimes we think if it's not too many people for the family, but sometimes the family is so big that we are. But it's open discussion. So this is how we do it now. But this establishing trust, it's not always easy. So,
Dr. Hauer.
Yeah, 3 quick comments. First is I forgot to give credit that when I started to work in palliative care, it's because there was the perfect storm of having a social worker and a chaplain seeing similar unmet needs. So to me, that's really important, that it wasn't me as an individual, is that I was learning from other disciplines on those spiritual aspects that are so important and the emotional aspects that are so important. In terms of really difficult circumstances, what first came to mind is when a parent is in an intensely emotional state. And I think in pediatric palliative care, we become comfortable being in uncomfortable space. And understandably, for a lot of clinicians, their first response is to try to fix the emotion, and as opposed to being present with the emotion. And so it is meant having circumstances where I literally in my mind have this image where I think of if you have a bubbled water and you shake the bottle and you open it, it'll spew. And so it's like more gradually opening it so that it kind of gradually gets diffused. But that's an aspect of, again, I think of it as being part of communication education, of how to be present in those times so that the immediate need is being attended. And it takes a high skill because often what's generating the emotion is the parent also wants to be certain that there's commitment to the medical care they view as needed for their child. So it's not just about attending to the emotional experience, it's the duality. And then the second part I wanted to say is because of the, like I'm a physician, I obviously develop skills in the psychosocial realm and in the spiritual realm, but it's not my expertise. So I'll give just a simple example that there can be times when I'm helping translate complex medical information and what it might mean, and then there are other times we very purposefully have a follow-up meeting where it will be with, say, the social worker, because when I'm managing some of the medical things that way, the parent can share how awful it is to the circumstance of their child, and they can make statements without being worried how I might interpret what they're saying. When a clinician is present who is responsible for some of the treatment, sometimes we need to take that away so they can share in an honest way and not worry that they'll be viewed as being difficult or they'll be viewed as questioning the care that's being given, but to just process that emotion with somebody with a higher skill set. So those are just kind of some of the things that first come to mind with really difficult. And I'm going to end with, even though I finally, just in the last 2 years, recognize I have a high, I am an expert, and I encountered a parent where all of my best skills, it still remained that we were unable to align, and I had to figure out not only recalibrating, but rethinking my role. And then in addition, there was even a follow-up discussion, and because I just had a patient who died, I was also in an emotional state. And this is just to acknowledge that when you become comfortable with communication, you also become comfortable with kind of an honesty. And in the moment I started to cry, but I was able to kind of catch myself, but I made a decision not to talk about what was part of it, but just to say, my apologies, this week had some challenges. I'm still processing that. It is not related to our conversation that we're having, but then I could actually honestly reflect that I do have a worry I'm not the right person for you. And then that kind of opened up that she could honestly reflect back, no, I actually find, even though I couldn't tell this from this parent, she could reflect back, no, I actually trust you. And it kind of shifted things, so even messy times can, with a level of honesty, can still meet the needs. But what we did do is have the nurse practitioner take a much more lead role and have me kind of back away a little bit. And later then, my involvement kind of it was reestablished as being really important. So. A little more than...
Thank you, Dr. Loučka. According to your point of view as a psychologist, what is challenging in this area?
I think this is a very huge question. Besides what the ladies already mentioned, we could discuss lack of space, lack of time, lack of information, many other things. But I would definitely underscore the emotions being the key. I think that's usually, like when we have these conversations, usually when you say the sentence, "This must be so difficult for you," that's usually the moment when the people gets kind of like moving and open to also actually being able to receive the help from the team. And it's usually like these few words: "I can see how difficult this must be for you," or any other empathetic, statement or expressing that we actually are acknowledging their emotional burden. So I think this is like the key. If we don't do this, if we don't get this right, I think it's vicious circle, and we can be sorting out other things, such as having a nice room for these conversations. But if we are not able to do the emotional part of the work, it's very difficult.
So expressing emotions is allowed or accepted from a professional point of view. So, Mr. Hodulík, Dr. Hodulík.
Thank you. I think over everything is I should want to do it. And the second thing is this communication skills, emotional intelligence, everything we can develop. But under everything should be I want to do it. And if I want, then to be open, to have an open mind, to get this new, let's say, soft information. And as we said today, are like two ways. One is this my role of the doctor, of the nurse, of whatever. And the second is the line is this soft skills which I have to develop, or if I want.
Dr. Hauer, you were already spoken about communication failure. Could you tell us what does it mean for you? And other experts, please, could you mention what you think of it as well? Thank you.
So for me, there's two parts. One is that we normalize that for learners, that we ensure that they don't view it as failure, but the each iterative experience becomes embedded in our understanding of emotional complexity and how we approach it. And I apologize, I'll just restate the second part is that then we can also normalize that we may not always know the impact of effective communication. Again, it might feel like a failure because we won't have received much response back depending where the patient or parent is at in receiving information that they later reflect on. But what I am struck by is how often seeds get planted. And then communication failure, I jumped the gun with that example that I shared, so I kind of already covered that, but I like sharing so that it's a reminder that even with the highest skill set, it is rare now for me, and actually it kind of caught me off guard because I hadn't had what I viewed as a failure for a long time. I was actually, it sounds odd to say, but glad to be humbled and be reminded that I can't be the person to meet all needs, and so it becomes an important tool to share again with individuals earlier in the process to rethink it as a need for recalibration, both in my own individual skills and recalibration of who's the best person to meet the need for the parent at that time.
Maybe I would say two things. The first is a colleague of ours, Irena Závadová, who is also one of the co-founders of the ESPER program. She often says that there is like a myth that the patients feel if there is anything wrong with me, physician would tell me. And the physicians feel if the patient needs more information, he would ask. So why to tell about these things? So this is one part of the how we create the silo, I would say. And the other part, that's again the picture about being a god. I think, we have heard it many times from physicians saying, before I know everything, I don't want to have this conversation. We need to finish these tests, and then I will have, like a long report for the patient, and I'm able now to really explain what's going on. And very often we miss all the opportunities when this could be useful, and we are actually creating the bigger and bigger silo, or like the problem of what's going on, what's happening, why they are not talking to me, and then I move to another hospital, and the opportunity is really lost. So I think thinking about the silo, what I like is thinking about how we create this, actually, how we are helping to keep this going on, and I think these two aspects might be some of the important bits, I guess.
Dr. Hodulík?
I will say as well one more thing, which is as well quite important, is to have a space to talk. Because if we are talking in the corridor with so many other patients, and so it's the information is gone. We can have empathy, we can have communication skills, but how to say between, let's say, 1 million people on the corridor. So it's for me as well, very important thing. And second, what we have not to forget is that self-care. So we can have empathy, we can have communication skills. We are doing every day, but mostly we are forgetting for that we want to do it for a long time. And if we want to do it for a long time, we can have some hobbies or whatever which will fill up the batteries, and we can every day to come there and do this great job.
And what kind of regeneration do you recommend to your clients, doctors, nurses? I know it's according to each type of our personality.
It's very difficult questions because we are human beings and everybody, we are different. So for somebody it's good to go to the forest, for somebody it's good to be with the friends, for somebody it's good to, I don't know, read a book, whatever. But everybody of us, we should know what is filling up the batteries, because for everybody will be different thing.
Okay, there is no manual for it.
No.
Okay,
Maybe.
Julie, Hauer, you wanted as well to mention something, or am I wrong? I noticed that you wanted to say something again.
Thank you. Two things came to mind. The first is that reflection with the teams we work with, not on all circumstances, but periodically, because it reassures, it revalidates our effort, it recalibrates our effort because it's talking with other individuals with other expertise. So it's kind of part of that iterative learning, but also just being able to also share, yeah, that was really hard, and that's okay at times. And then, so that for me is, there still is, I get re-energized by that. And then, yeah, personally, it's so personal, but I can certainly say I know what self-care needs to happen and ways to do it, but it takes an intentional effort. I literally have to, on a weekly and monthly basis, push myself at times because I can get embedded passionately in work effort, and then I kind of get to the point where I'm starting to get drained, so I have to push myself on a weekly basis to make sure I do the thing I know re-energizes me, and for me it's walking, reading, and music, and not even in that order.
Please, Professor Kolenová.
As I have mentioned today, for me it's my family. I'm not professor, I'm my mom at home, so I do everything at home. But I realized that also, as you mentioned, debriefing with our team, talking about difficult situation, it's really helping, and with the colleagues to share things. So it's simple things that to have time to talk about it, because sometimes you have so many tasks that you just go from one thing to another, and you just pack it in yourself, difficult conversation, and then you go to the next patient, and so you pile it up. Yeah, and recently I discovered, for me, healing is just to go to fitness and to train, and it's really healing for me.
So I'm allowed to ask you if you would like to ask some questions. We have time for that. So it will be our pleasure. And you will share what do you think of with us. Excuse me?
Oh, and while you're doing that, I was just going to make one other quick comment. If I now lost it, though. This happens. I have one other thing I intentionally do is that, not surprisingly, some families, and I don't even like this term, but are easy to engage with. But what it really reflects is that we come typically from a similar background. They're very articulate. They have a clear sense of what's important to them on behalf of their child. And I literally think of it as I have to make sure I spend less time with them, even though it feels better to spend time with them. They actually they give some energy back to me without even knowing it. They think I'm helping them. Mm-hmm. And I shore that up so that I can then set aside a lot of time with the families who need it more, because they, for no reason, that they can't control, they just don't have the same reserve of tools within their emotional makeup, their family structure, etc. Mm-hmm. And so they deserve me to give more time. That's just a technique I use and I talk about with team members and with learners.
So questions?
Thank you very much for your great talks and great discussion, which is so important for me. I work in neonatology, and it's more of a comment and question, because in neonatology, you know, the perinatal status of a parent is so vulnerable. With hormones and emotions, and we have both NICU, where children die, and normal kids, normal newborns, which mother acts that they're really tragically reacting for phototherapy, which lasts for 2 days. Yeah. And it is so a big spectrum of emotions that if we ourselves do not have this emotional capacity, yes, it skips, and we lack of time, we lack of personal. So sometimes it's very difficult to find it, and we have actually no professional help. Yeah. So we have no psychologists. Psychologists are available for patients, not for us. And you know, it's like in between colleagues there are some tensions, and I like I love the quote that the physician is not a god anymore. I have a joke, and one of the most I like this joke, and which I'm telling to students, that what is the difference between a physician and a god? And the answer is that God knows for sure that he is not a physician. And this is this kind of tricky statement that we are in, and for example, for me, it's like I like to, despite all communication and soft skills that are actually teachable, which not everyone thinks that they are teachable, because it's like, you know, with CPR, it's like, of course, it's teachable, but it's like mother's instinct, that there's no literature of that, but everybody says, oh, you will have mother's instinct, and you won't. It's teachable. It's mother instinct. There's no evidence, and as well this soft skills that they're teachable, and this is very good. And how do you deal with that? With all this, do you have professionals in your hospitals that are helping to like resolve all these emotions? And how do you deal with that?
I'll
Thank you, Agata.
Okay, then Dr. Hauer. So I first just wanted the maternal instinct. I do want to make a quick comment on that for me there's two parts. We do see parents get a sense of where things are at, but we shouldn't wait for them to indicate that they're there. They still require us framing information. And I think that it's almost a way to say, well, parents will know. And then it kind of takes our duty away, but we still have a duty to, but it's, you know, using all the skills we've talked about. So I really thank you for bringing that up. So we are at a watershed in the States of recognizing there's a huge unmet need, and it's a contributor to burnout, and I'm sure which happened everywhere, that where it became a stark reality was COVID. And that, even more so for nurses and also for physicians. And I call it a watershed because I'm not even aware, now I work in the pediatric realm, and I'm not aware of any intentional program other than informal efforts through, say, the nurse leader who is developing their own skills and then providing support. But I do know it's now, there's a lens of focus on this too, because you'll retain nurses and physicians, but especially nurses, if we build that in in a systematic way within hospital systems.
Professor Kolenová.
We also have more informal way. We have increased the number of the psychologists, and we try to do. I've seen when I was in States, they had this monthly meeting, Food and Feelings, which I really liked, and we try to establish, but. With our psychologists, and we try to do it, but in our culture it did not really quite work. So I don't know why. But, so this was especially for young doctors. This Food and Feelings was, I thought we could try, but so, and we have this, as I mentioned, we have 4 times per year a place where we go as a team and we do all kind of activities. It's also for burnout, but it's not on a regular basis when something happens. But we have now for 2nd year a chaplain, and she was trained here in Czech Republic. She's quite helpful in this now, so she kind of monitor who is how and and try to help.
I forgot to mention one other in the States. A system that's been in place for now probably at least 15 years is, they call it Schwartz rounds, where it's a monthly interdisciplinary, and the focus is not clinical, it's all emotional. And it's a formal process of how to conduct it. There is a team to facilitate it, and it's nurses, physicians, social workers, and all of the focus is on processing the complex emotions that go into the experience. So that's pretty common in adult and pediatric hospitals. And yeah, the social workers end up bearing a brunt where they are available, but again, it's more the informal part.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for your great comment. You know, being a psychologist in different places where I had the chance to work, I've always felt that it's also my job a little bit to take care of the colleagues in the team, more or less. Having said that, there will never be enough psychologists to take care of all the employees in the hospital systems everywhere, I'm pretty sure. So I would rather reinforce the idea of putting in place some processes that can help, rather than waiting for somebody who will save the day for you. And you know, like things such as debriefing and even like informal support, like peer support, it can start with small group, 3 people. Hey guys, let's just meet at the end of the day for 10 minutes, just saying how it was for you, what have you learned, or what was tough, what was nice, sharing joys, sharing also the tough moments. It can start like that. I'm pretty sure if there is a chaplain, psychologist, social worker for each of us, that would be fantastic. But I think that we can do quite a lot ourselves as well. So that might be also a suggestion.
And now that you mention that, I think the importance of it is that when it's somebody who's part of their peer group, like a nurse lead who is facilitating processing of experiences with nurses that trust that person, it tends to get at more complex discussions than a kind of, but then the debriefing in that. So it's remarkable. You can tell I actually forget, there's a lot of things done, but because it's these small things that happen kind of on an as-needed basis, kind of, as needed, that it's easy to forget that there are ways to embed effective strategies that don't have to become these expensive, elaborate, and not even realistic processes.
There was a second question. Dr. Hodulík, do you want to mention something to it? Please, can you give him the micro? And the second question,
For this support, now I'm more than happy that I can support it. Some doctors from perinatal palliative care, and I am for them as an individual coach. and it can help as well. And mostly they have supervisor, and as well on the second line the people as I am as an individual coach, it can support it, but I know that it's not for all the medical stuff. So I totally agree with Martin as he said that if we can find out some systematic solution for that in every hospital will be some system how to do it and can be different, it will be great. But I don't know when it can be, but we can never sleep in this time.
I have some technical question. Do you hear everybody comfortably? Okay, if not, please speak directly to the microphone because the noise is much better. So another question, if it's possible.
Good afternoon. My name is Josef Mališ and I'm pediatric oncologist from this hospital, and I'm taking care of cancer patient and parents with their cancer patient for more than many years, and I am so-called, as Mr. Hodulík said, a little bit more senior doctor, but I'm
but open-minded, as we can hear.
Probably not absolutely senior, yeah, but I am glad that, to be here because I am glad to be receiving the process of reverse education or training from younger people. So it's a really good feeling. But to be serious and correct, I have had many talks with parents and talking about the diseases of their children. And I should say that I am not enough experienced and educated, and every time we are facing very strange and unusual questions, and we should react, and we should tell them the real answer or comment to this. So my question is probably to Professor Kolenová and to Dr. Loučka. In some situation, regardless the improving outcomes of treatment of a cancer patient, we are sometimes facing patients and parents where we should tell to the parents that their child has incurable disease, and the disease is completely refractory to any treatment, and there is no place for a surgery, chemotherapy or radiotherapy, and that the disease will carry the child to the death. And in this situation, I think we have two groups of patients. One group completely realize what we are talking them and realize that the disease is incurable, and sooner or later the child will die. And on the other hand, we have a group of patients that completely refuse our information and rely on any other treatment and tell us, no, it's not possible that our child will die. We will take our child to other hospital abroad. We will publish our story in media, in TV, and we will be asking other specialists for treatment. It is a very difficult situation, and we repeat the talk with the parents several times. But do you have any, not recommendation, but your experience how to deal with these patients in this situation? Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
This is a huge question. I think it's a very tough one. So there is definitely more than one thing that we could do. So maybe I will say a few things and the other people can add later. I think maybe the first thing would be give up the expectation that you will change their mind. Because I think that if we pressure too much, it only make the like bridge longer, you know. So I think if we pressure too much, it won't help the situation. And I can see that sometimes we feel like they are making a mistake, and this is very difficult for people to accept. We know that it's not good for them, it's not good for the child. They could have some good time at home, and they are rather spending it on these, you know, strange things and decisions. But I think that we really have to accept the reality that sometimes people will make bad choices, or at least different choices than we would do in their shoes, but they are still the parents, they are still the family. Of course, we can ask the court to, you know, overrun parents' decisions, but that's, you know, very extreme decisions. So I think first, lower the expectations and be honest in terms of, okay, I respect you, I really respect you, I disagree with this particular decision, but I want you to know that I respect you, and if you want to do it, that's okay for us. You know, I disagree personally, but I respect you as a parent. I think this first step sometimes can help the family to think, okay, so we don't have to fight with this doctor, so maybe we'll be willing a little bit more to listen to their actual perspective. But that would be like one step, and now I give the space to others.
You comment for, and then I have one.
Yeah, when we were talking at the beginning, the failure communication, so I had it in my mind, but I didn't have a chance to mention. So I was thinking about communication, our discussions, when I thought it was a failure of me, that I did the wrong thing. And Josef, we know each other very well, and he really great help also to our patients when I was seeking the treatment for the patients, because before I talk to the family, we always do the big research, you know, that I can really tell them that there is no treatment, there is no chance, or this. But I don't have any recommendation or recipe, because I am learning this, and this is my great challenge now, how to communicate with people who have not even that they refuse, but they have also this conspiracy, and then now maybe after COVID came even more, and in the culture where I am, it's quite rooted now that you doctors know, but you just don't want to tell us, you know. So it's even, they go even deeper. So it's not just that you don't want. So I'm just trying to work on the compassion. How can I connect with this? And not to convince them, it's not possible, but it's my learning. We do the same, that we always tell, if you want to get second opinion, please, we will help you to give the, you know, things, and you can go to ask. But I think it's even more now difficult with this.
I'm kind of restating the same. So I don't work in the oncology space, but because I work in a space where sometimes families, they can go to, say, Mexico to get something that actually isn't an approved therapy. And I come from a perspective where I know that they are going to be utilizing a lot of resources without benefit. And and I know this is relevant to oncology. It's, you know, like bone marrow transplant space is one, you know, seeking stem cell transplant. So I also agree that it's counterintuitive, but I think of it as we still maintain our duty of honest information. And then we, when we get that stark reaction back, that because there are so many variables for the parent, we can't tease out in that discussion, that then the first response is, you are a good parent for, you know, Daniel. I remain available. I'm not cutting off the conversation when I say this, but we will always be available to reflect together on what you are pursuing, so that our team can help you kind of reflect on why it might or might not make sense for Daniel at this, you know, say a month from now or 2 months from now. So it's to keep it open. But I also agree that, you know, part of it is just that experience that I can't think of ever convincing a parent who starts with a response back that they are unable to take the information I have as being valid to them as where they're at that specific moment in time.
Okay. Do you want to mention anything? Okay. So now, please, yes.
Maybe I'll just very briefly mention one more
briefly.
thing. I think it's also good not to wait until the very last moment with breaking these, huge news. I dare to say that in many cases we kind of expect that it will not go very well, and I know you as well that you are amazing. So I think we speak about other physicians maybe more, but sometimes we wait until the very last moment, and then it's a huge shock for parents and for families, and they are not prepared for that. So I think it could also help if we kind of let the door open, as Julie had on her slide. Everything is possible, but it doesn't mean that everything will happen or something like that. So, we will do our best, and we hope it will work. But I, have to reinforce that this is a serious condition, and and some kids might not make it. But so I think this could also help.
And now, please, very brief last question, and then we have to continue because we are almost run of the time.
Thank you. I don't know if that worked. Yeah, so maybe it's even better that Dr. Malish asked it prior me, because my question is something which is more to that topic. You all said that you are all participating either as a lecturer or as a teacher or as an attendee in trainings and education, and we discussed that there are doctors, nurses, sometimes in a joint event, sometimes separately. But my question goes to patients. If you ever had also patients on spot, because I know you obviously have many experiences talking to the patients, and you can transfer these knowledges and situation to the role plays. But if ever you had that, and if you can share with us pros and cons having patients in such a training and facilitation.
Who first?
Okay.
Okay, Julie Hauer.
Yes, thank you. This is actually so important in communication. So it has become the norm for us to utilize parents. The process started when I think back probably about 20 years ago in pediatrics. And thinking back, there's been a process of realizing there is an importance of, first and foremost, of seeking an equal representation. But that can be hard because it naturally goes more to those who are the most articulate, but they also can't represent other families quite as well. The second is to have a process so that there is benefit in having some expectations for a parent, because otherwise the one downside is occasionally it can become so focused on their experience as opposed to I'm reflecting back to consider, they have to come from their experience. So I kind of misspoke a little bit, but to ensure that it also doesn't dominate as opposed to because hearing from parents is so beneficial in terms of our ability to hear it from their perspective. So it has profound value. And then the separate part is we know from studies that parents value that opportunity. It's part of the legacy of their bereavement or the experience that they're still living through in a child who has a life-limiting condition. So thank you.
Yeah, excellent question. I have both good and bad experiences with that, actually. The good ones first. There is a technique called goldfish bowl exercise, which you can find in literature, when it's actually a structured education using real patients and having discussion with medical students or residents or whoever. I think this is really great. I have very good experiences with that, and I think it works perfectly, but it must be prepared, because you must think about several things. You have to support the patient because it's an experience for them, so it just doesn't end like that. There is a lot of things that you should do to organize it well, but it can work and it's perfect. Second point, as we mentioned in the morning, I believe that the education doesn't finish with the clock, by the end of the session, but it continues when they are going to the hospital for clinical clerkship. So this must be also taken seriously as part of the education. So when they go to the hospital, we should also provide them some feedback and some, structured support how to use this experience in their learning. The bad experiences that I have, we have been also running continuing education for junior oncologists for several years now, and these workshops are usually like afternoon workshops. They are free of charge and they are open. And over the last few years, we have always had some people from patients' representatives groups who would actually come to these workshops, and just being there, bringing their experience. It works okay for some things, but it always brings a lot of burden and pressure on the physicians who are present, because they feel, can I ask those questions? Can I say how to handle complicated family when actually I have a mother here who is crying all the time when she's watching the role play based scenario and so on. So I'm a big fan of using patients and families as part of the education, but it must be well thought through, and then it might actually be beneficial.
Mm-hmm. The one other part that came to mind that is embedded in some training programs is with communication learning session is then to also follow up with a journaling or a storytelling process, so that it gets at what you just said, that it's an ongoing process, and then it depending on how the mentoring program is set up, then it's a structured way to then have kind of reflecting on, well, what has transpired since our last session, and then also a peer process in that, so that it's kind of sharing with peers.
And briefly, if it's possible.
Okay, as I have mentioned, we have this multidisciplinary talk, and we always have a young doctor there. So then at the end, so first month they just listening, and then they like if I'm there or my another colleague, they deliver, and we don't. We give them feedback afterwards. So we debrief, we sit, and with our psychologists. So if we say, so today it will be your first talk, so he can actually train. But before he was prepared, and so we try to do this.
Dr. Hodulík, briefly.
Very shortly.
If it's possible. Yeah.
I don't know whether you will be happy what I will say, but I will say it. I think I will give you an analogy. I think it's a very good idea. I like your idea that the patient will be more educated. Finally, in the other side, I can see that it's similar, like if we will teach the employee the manager skills. I think we should start by the healthcare positions. We should start to educate it, the doctors, the nurses first, and I think will came the time when to educate it the patients. Oh, sorry, I didn't understand the question.
Okay, may I propose the next question? I'm really interested in the protocols. What kind of protocols for difficult communication do you use more often, and why? Briefly, is that possible, Professor Kolenová?
We learn
or
this,
you don't use
we do this vital talk, so we try to do this guide.
Vital talks?
Yeah, vital talks and guide, the process.
That's the most common system or education in the States that is used. And then like for us in pediatric palliative care, we literally have, it's like this long list of different communication tools we kind of pull from. And so I don't even think about it anymore. But when it comes to the education, it's just selecting a few to focus on, so that it's not overwhelming too much.
So it's the most complex type of protocol, you would say, for your use?
You mean, in terms of, when we're focusing on, well, no, for communication, we start by focusing on more routine communication skills, and so would use more like vital talks as a, so that it can build from there. And then with specialists who are in training, then we can hone down to more a larger range. And I showed some of the things that we would use as in giving examples as kind of protocols of what can you use in different circumstances so it's easy to remember and then utilize in the moment.
Okay.
And I apologize, I might be misunderstanding a little bit the question.
I think it's enough. Thank you. Dr. Loučka.
I personally believe that there is no like the best protocol for all situations. We have plenty of them. Dr. Hrdlička made like a review of all those like tools and experiences. There's plenty of literature which you can choose from. I think very often we would see that they have the same message incorporated in them and using different abbreviations and nicknames and things for that. But I think it's important actually to understand the goal of the conversation, what we are going to do, and then you can actually pick any tool that is available and that you like. Some people might like something else, you know. You can use the app that Centrum Dohody has developed or whatever, just to remind you of the points. But the learning is not, you know, having the protocol. The protocol itself doesn't teach you much, I dare to say. It's a tool. If you learn, like it's a tool that you can help to really think about what's important, but it doesn't do the learning for you.
Dr. Hodulík?
Yes, I totally
Do you have
agree.
any recommendations?
Yes, it's just
you agree?
it's very important to have the goal. What
do you want
is
to
the
deliver
goal
to?
in the end, and then use the tools which are like important or which will help me. It's like the tools. If you have a bag of tools, it's like now I need the screwdriver to fix it, and now I need different tools. So I'm thinking it's working like this.
Can I just quickly
Please.
comment on this?
Yes, please.
We had this conversation with Julie yesterday. Maybe you could just share our thoughts that we talked about yesterday when you mentioned how it was difficult at the beginning to take patients' history, because can you just... No, go ahead. Just if you can share this.
Yeah, no, this was a great reminder. So again, it's normalizing that, you know, when you're a medical student and you're taught how to take a history, you take a history, but you don't yet understand how that information is going to be processed. And you understand some of it, but not all of it. And it's not until you take the history and you take more histories, and then you start to have these aha moments of, oh, this is how then I utilize that information I've obtained from history. So it still is, we need the protocols for, but it's again a reminder that ideally it's core skills in medical school, and then they get fine-tuned to, you know, the profession you enter, you know, pediatrics, et cetera, and then also fine-tuned to those who go into subspecialty areas. Obviously, we're not quite at that point yet, but people can't know what they're gaining from that tool. They can have kind of a concept, but until they're in the moment and they're listening, they're trying to process what they're hearing back and kind of those aha moments. So thank you.
So thank you very much for your very interesting answers. Thank you.
And maybe I will take an advantage of having a microphone. So thank you very much, all the experts and guests, for sharing the knowledge with us. For example, I personally am a bit wiser now than 3 hours before, and thank you all for the brave questions, and I'm really glad how the event went today, or have gone. So thank you very much.